today God is going to show Assyria who's the boss. And that is my intro. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Now Let's Be Honest. My name is David.
And my name's Brian.
And this is our Prophet Series, part 23, where we are slowly but surely working our way through the books of the Old Testament prophets. And when I say slowly and surely, I mean it, because we are still in the very first book, the book of Isaiah, despite the fact that we are in part 23. I do want to give you another warning ahead of time that the audio might still be wonky. What I did is I did move the camera back, and I moved the microphone's a little further away because we're trying to get rid of that echo, but for some reason it is giving us a lot of trouble, so be patient with us if there's a slight echo to these videos. We're working on it, trust me.
Yes.
Other than that, real quick, announcements. If you want the slides that we use for these videos, you can get those at nowletsbehonest.com/resources, and if you'd like to support us on Patreon, you can do that at patreon.com/David Tate. The slides are free, Patreon is not. Thank you so much for those of y'all who are supporting me on Patreon, and thank you for anybody who's not supporting me on Patreon, like that you're here too. And I'm just excited to get into this book of the prophets and this chapter. That was a really weird that's
way of wording it.
Really weird way of wording it. Yeah, very good. Okay, you know what? I'm going to hand it over to the person who's probably better at speaking than I am. Brianne, could you open us up in a word of prayer?
Absolutely. Lord, we thank you so much that we are able to be here, right now, by your ability to put the breath inside of our lungs and giving us life itself. We ask that as we go into the study that we can be fully focused and devoted to you. We can set aside our distractions and look upon you and your word and open our hearts and our minds to the wisdom that you have available for us. I pray that as we read these things, it's not purely just for information, but as a way for us to learn about who you are and what your character is, and as a way for us to grow closer to you with each word that we read, and that we can use that information to go out into the world and be a light to others. Lord, we thank you for all that you are and all that you do for us. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Okay, so we don't have as much content to cover today, so we might be able to go a little bit more in depth, but our goal is to make a slightly shorter video. We'll see which one ends up happening. Probably going to still end up being the same length as the other videos. Who knows? But today we are going to be in Isaiah chapter 37, verses 21 through 38, so just the back half of Isaiah chapter 37. And I've titled this one, Immanuel, God with Us, which might sound like it's a callback to Isaiah chapter 7, and that's because it is. The word Immanuel is not going to show up in this chapter, nor is the phrase God with us going to show up in this chapter, but where we're at in the book of Isaiah, specifically chapters 36 and 37, are definitely one big callback to some stuff we talked about in Isaiah chapter 7, whenever Isaiah confronted the king Ahaz up at this pool location. And if you want to know a little bit more in depth about that, we did talk about that in the previous video, so I'm not going to go super in depth into that today, but I am going to ask Brianne real quick to just kind of recap us on some context of what happened in the last section that we just covered, because that's going to play directly into what we're reading today. So could you give us a little recap?
Yeah. So right now we know that Israel is split into two kingdoms, and the northern part has been taken over and destroyed. And so now we've gotten to the chapter where the king of Assyria comes, and he's going through trying to conquer the land and take the land. And he sends his cupbearer to go and talk to Hezekiah down in the southern kingdom. And the people there, like the Israelites themselves, it's the tribe of Judah, right?
Yes.
And their faith has been kind of wavering, and so they're kind of easily persuaded by things that are going to be said. And so he goes to Hezekiah and he says, hey, we're coming to destroy you unless you want to side with us. And he tries to give this really convincing argument where he's like, hey, we can give you land and food and water and all these amazing things. And the people thankfully go back to Hezekiah, and he says, hey, don't accept that offer, and he goes and immediately prays to God. And now we're here at chapter 37, and we're waiting to see what God's response to Hezekiah is going to be.
Yes. So the way that it ended last week was literally with Hezekiah on his knees praying. And he says, God, I need you to move in a big, powerful way, because I need you to show that Assyria is not God, and that their gods are not more powerful than you, and that you alone are God.
Yeah.
And within the context of the book of Isaiah, you'll understand how significant and important this moment is, hence why I wanted to slow down a little bit. We could have covered really all of chapters 36 and 37 last time, but I really wanted to slow down here because this is a very big moment in the book, because Isaiah's whole message to the people has been, don't trust in foreign powers, trust in God. And really, Assyria has been the looming threat for the entire book. Ever since the early chapters of Isaiah, Assyria has been slowly making their way there, and Isaiah has been warning the people that they're going to be wanting to trust in all these other people, and they need to trust in God. And so finally, all of that is coming to a head right here in these chapters. Assyria is literally at Judah's doorstep and is saying, it's time for you to surrender. And Hezekiah's got a choice to make, and he has made the right choice. And so today we're going to see how God responds. And sure enough, we get a response immediately, and this is what we read in Isaiah chapter 37, starting in verse 21. Then Isaiah the son of Amoz sent to Hezekiah, saying, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, because you have prayed to me concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria, this is the word that the Lord has spoken concerning him. She despises you, she scorns you, the virgin daughter of Zion. She wags her head behind you, the daughter of Jerusalem. Whom have you mocked and reviled? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes on to the heights? Against the Holy One of Israel. By your servants you have mocked the Lord, and you have said, with my many chariots I have gone up to the heights of the mountains, to the far recesses of Lebanon, to cut down its tallest cedars, its choicest cypresses, to come to its remotest height, its most fruitful forest. I dug wells and drank waters to dry up the sole of my foot, all the streams of Egypt. Okay, so here we have a short little return to the poetic prose that has been so common in Isaiah, but it comes in the form of God's response directed towards the people of Assyria in response to Hezekiah's prayer. What do you think about it?
It's cool to see how God still stays faithful to them, despite them not necessarily being fully devoted to him, because it just takes Hezekiah's one prayer and God immediately hears him and responds to him, and is like, who are these people that are mocking y'all, which is therefore mocking me, and that's really cool.
No, it shows the power of prayer. And it once again shows the character of God. If you've been following with us in our Hesed series, which we haven't done for a while, but we'll have to get back to it at some point. In the Hesed series, we're basically talking about all the different occurrences of this one word in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and it's the Hebrew word Hesed. And that word means steadfast love, loving kindness, covenantal love. People translate it different ways. But one thing that God reveals about himself in this key moment in the book of Exodus is he says that he is a God who is slow to anger and abounding in Hesed. And he shows faithfulness and Hesed to the thousands of generations, but he shows he'll pay back people for their sin to the third and fourth generation, right? And so when it comes to God's character, we see that he generally favors showing Hesed and loving kindness and graciousness to people rather than wrath. He will show wrath if it's necessary, but he favors showing grace. And I think it's what we see here. Right? By and large, the people deserve to be destroyed. Hezekiah deserves to be destroyed. But Hezekiah is being faithful in this moment. He's praying a prayer, and God is responding quickly. Right? And he's saying, my people have sought me. I'm going to respond. That's all it takes. One person, just the leader, being faithful. Which I think says some good stuff about our God. And it teaches us some stuff just in general to how we should relate to God. We might think we're not making a difference, but just one powerful prayer can make all the difference in the world. If Hezekiah had chosen to trust in anybody other than God, Judah would have probably been destroyed right now. Instead, they're going to be sustained for another almost 1.5 centuries, which is really cool because, like you mentioned, Israel has been destroyed at this point, the northern kingdom. They were destroyed 21 years before this event, but now Judah is going to survive a little while longer. Unfortunately, Hezekiah is also going to kind of be responsible for why they get destroyed a century and a half later, but we'll talk about that next week, so be sure to come back for that.
Also, wait, before we start, just another thing that's like over the whole thing. I think a cool kind of contrast, if you're thinking about last chapter in this chapter, or last video in this video, whenever the cupbearer came, he was telling Hezekiah that Hezekiah can't do anything to help, like, to stop Assyria if he doesn't align with them, but also that God couldn't do anything, and that he was just like any of the other foreign false gods that surrounded them, that they've went in and destroyed all of these other people. Why would their God be any different? So it's really cool that he prays and there's an immediate response. And there's just this really stark contrast between that chapter and this chapter. And then I think it's also interesting that the people weren't serving God, and I think it was Isaiah that told them, hey, if you're not going to serve God, he is going to send people to like discipline you. So it's God that set in motion Assyria coming and disciplining them, but it's also God who is saving them from Assyria, which is, it's cool also because both of those things are set in motion by him.
Yeah.
So
ideally, it wouldn't have taken until Assyria got to their doorstep before they finally repented. Right. Because Judah's been pretty much almost entirely destroyed at this point. There's only a few cities left and they're going to have to rebuild.
Right.
But yes, God is the one who set it in motion and he's going to be the one protecting them. And there was something I was going to say. Rabshakeh, that's the cupbearer's name, or that was his title at least. He was partially correct, right? You can imagine him saying, Hezekiah, you can't do anything and neither can your God. And Hezekiah is probably responding, you're correct in the fact that I can't do anything. But when you say my God can't do anything, that is where you're wrong. And so here's where we're going to see what exactly God's planning on doing. So we start off, then Isaiah, son of Amoz, sent to Hezekiah, right? So this is Isaiah, the author of the book. And he says this, thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel. You're going to see the emphasis. You'll notice that I highlighted God of Israel in yellow here because it's repeated throughout this whole section because there's an emphasis on the fact that this is specifically the God of Israel, mainly in light of Rabshakeh's whole argument, right? He was saying, we've destroyed all these other gods. Why do you think that your God's that important? What makes you think that he's set apart? And so there's this emphasis on the fact that he is the God of Israel and he is set apart. So he is supreme over all things, but he has specifically chosen Israel as his like home base. Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, because you have prayed to me concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria, this is the word the Lord has spoken concerning him. So right off the bat, before God actually speaks to Assyria, he speaks to Hezekiah and he clarifies why he's saying these things to Assyria. And he says, it's because you prayed that prayer. We don't know what God would be saying to Assyria if Hezekiah had not prayed that prayer. He probably would have said, I'm going to knock down the gates for you and I'll let you take the spoil and destroy them all. But because Hezekiah was faithful, he says, this is what I'm going to say to Assyria. She despises you. She scorns you, the virgin daughter of Zion. She wags her head behind you, the daughter of Jerusalem. So here, in this first little stanza here, Jerusalem is portrayed as a helpless virgin who gets the last laugh after the unwelcome advances of her would-be rapist. Assyria would have their way with Jerusalem, but Yahweh would not allow it, and he won't allow it. Kind of graphic imagery to start off, but it highlights what God has really been going for throughout this entire book of Isaiah here. He has allowed Assyria to get to this point where they were going to, metaphorically, violate Judah.
Right.
And they had literally gotten all the way to Jerusalem, the most intimate part of Judah. Literally, so there's a reason why this intimate language is being used here. They've gotten to the most intimate part of Judah, and they're really about to... I don't want to use too crass of language, so I'm going to try to tone it down a little bit to keep it a little more PG-13 rather than R. They're about to violate her. And God says, yeah, I'm not going to let you do that. He swoops in as a knight in shining armor and stops them from violating what he views to be, I guess, his daughter, in a way, right? So he's talking to Assyria and says, she despises you, she scorns you, the virgin daughter of Zion. So the emphasis on virgin, right? Untouched. She wags her head behind you, the daughter of Jerusalem. So as Assyria is, like the imagery is Assyria leaving, and Judah's just shaking her head, being like, you couldn't do anything. Not with my dad watching. Right? What do you think about this opening imagery?
It's interesting. I feel like this is something that a lot of people don't even realize that's like in the Bible, just imagery like this, that it's not really highlighted or talked about just because the imagery is what it is.
Yeah, and what I've noticed is as you progress through the major prophets especially, it's almost like the imagery gets more and more crass as time passes because you have Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. And Isaiah is the earliest of those, right? And then Jeremiah is being written around the time that Judah is being destroyed, and then Ezekiel is written during the exile. And it seems like with passing time, the imagery gets more and more crass.
Yeah.
Because the people are sinning more, and God uses very strong language to send a clear message.
Yeah.
In this case, though, the message is actually for the benefit of the people, which is nice.
Yeah, it's towards the enemy.
Yeah, because it's about protecting their virginity in a way. But yeah, there's a lot of very crass language, especially in the prophets, because whenever a holy man of God stands before people and uses strong language like that, it's going to make them listen.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, wow, that packs a punch. Right. Especially, it's like, wow. That's a really good guy. I'm surprised to hear those words come out of his mouth. It's a vulgar metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay, but then he moves on, and he's going to explain precisely why God is rerouting the rapist and why he's running them off. Whom have you mocked and reviled? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes to the heights? Against the Holy One of Israel. By your servants you have mocked the Lord, and you have said, with my many chariots I have come up the heights of the mountains, to the far recesses of Lebanon, to cut its tallest cedars, its choicest cypresses, to come to its remotest height, its most fruitful forest. I dug wells and drank waters, to dry up with the sole of my foot all the streams of Egypt. So here God kind of lays out why he's attacking back. Because here the Assyrians have come marching down, boasting in who they are and what they've done and what their goal is. They're saying, we're just going to demolish everything until we dry up the water in Egypt.
Yeah.
And God says, but here was your mistake. You mocked me. And that is not acceptable. And sure enough, that's exactly what Hezekiah prayed. Hezekiah didn't pray to God and say, hey, we deserve to be delivered. He didn't say, come to us because we've been faithful. He says, God, these people are mocking you. And you won't tolerate that. Because Hezekiah knows the people haven't been faithful. It's not like they deserve to be delivered at all. He says the same thing that Moses prays, the same thing that a lot of faithful people of God pray. They're saying, God, your glory's at stake here.
Right.
Step up and fight for us. So Sennacherib's boasts had not gone unnoticed. Yahweh heard them, and he was not happy. Both he and his servants had boasted about the unstoppable nature of their forces, and here Yahweh warns them that they have no idea who they are dealing with. Assyria might boast about conquering all the lands along the way, but their boasting would come to an end right now. In Yahweh, Assyria had finally met their match. Right? They swoop in there, and they're just taking out all the different other gods of all the other nations. But then they walked up to Jerusalem, and God says, I'm not letting you in here.
Yeah.
What do you think of this?
I think it's kind of cool. Like I feel like there's a slight bit of like humor behind it, like God being able to see like who are you talking about? Like are you really trying to mock me? Like there's power behind it, but it's also kind of like funny too, because he's almost like, really, like, are you really trying to like come and mock me and take over my people? Yeah, that's not happening. So it's kind of cool.
Well, you definitely see some humor there just in the opening lines. Whom have you mocked and reviled? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes to the heights? Basically, he's saying, did you not think this through before you spoke?
Yeah.
Like, do you know who you're mocking right now?
Yeah.
Do you know who you raised your voice against and lifted up your eyes against? He says, come on. Like, think this through.
Yeah.
You are an idiot.
Use common sense, basically.
Against the Holy One of Israel. Oh, big mistake, buddy. And here, once again, whenever he says Israel, he's not specifically talking about the northern kingdom. He's using Israel as a title for the people of Abraham, right? The people of Jacob and stuff. By your servants you have mocked the Lord, and you have said, with my many chariots I have gone up the heights of the mountains to the far recesses of Lebanon, right? So he's just listing out all the things that they boasted about.
Yeah.
I did this in Lebanon. I did this with the cypresses. I did this with the forests. I dug wells. I drank waters to dry up with the sole of my foot all the streams of Egypt.
And he's like, but did you make all of creation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry. Where were you whenever I formed all things?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because I created you too.
Yeah, I made you also.
Yeah. And so this really is God just totally mocking them. And that's one thing that I do love about the prophets. There's a lot of mockery in them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cynicism. There's a lot of just outright sarcasm.
There definitely is.
I think it's fantastic, but it's necessary, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people miss that, but it's the best way to make a point.
There's purpose behind it, yeah.
Yeah, the quickest way to win an argument is by kind of pointing out the flaws in another person's argument with sarcasm, right? You don't have to give this super elaborate response. You just have to sarcastically be like, really? That's the best you got? And then they're like, oh, I guess you're right. And that's exactly what God's doing here. But okay, let's move on. Sorry, I forgot I put that meme up there. All right. Have you not heard that I determined it long ago? I planned from days of old what now I bring to pass, that you should make fortified cities crash into heaps of ruins, while their inhabitants, shorn of strength, are dismayed and confounded, and have become like plants of the field and like tender grass, like grass on the housetops, blighted before it is grown. I know you're sitting down, and you're going out and coming in, and you're raging against me. Because you have raged against me, and your complacency has come to my ears, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I will turn you back on the way by which you came. You see why I said that God's showing Assyria who's boss?
Oh yeah, I would
in the opener?
imagine like this is like one of those moments where like they hear that and it's like dead silent and everyone like just takes like 3 steps back.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
we're gonna go back now.
Yeah.
Yes, I love this.
Mm-hmm.
I love whenever God just rolls up his sleeves. You know,
Putting on the Ritz.
yeah. When he rolls up his sleeves, he ain't putting on the Ritz. Our God is an awesome God. This is the lightning in his footsteps and thunder in his footsteps that Rich Mullins was talking about. Like, this is it. God shows up. He's like, oh, no. You think you can walk up here and just mock me? Sit back down. I got some mocking to do of my own.
Mm-hmm.
Have you not heard? I determined it long ago. Right? And remember what he was just quoting. He was quoting all the things that they were boasting about.
Right.
And he's like, oh, did you not know that I planned that?
Mm-hmm.
I allowed you to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you did to Lebanon, I allowed it.
Mm-hmm.
All the trees you took down, I let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Have you not heard? I determined it long ago. I planned from days of old what now I bring to pass, that you should make fortified cities crash into heaps of ruins, while their inhabitants, shorn of strength, are dismayed and confounded, and have become like plants of the field and like tender grass, like grass on the housetops, blighted before it's grown. He's like, yeah, I planned all that out.
Mm-hmm.
You use that to boast against me? I'm the one who literally wrote out the schedule.
Yeah.
You're gonna use my own schedule to boast against my power?
Yeah.
You didn't even know. Yeah, you didn't even know I was the one in charge. This is like an employee walking up to the CEO, not realizing he's talking to the CEO.
Oh, yeah.
And talking about how much power he has in the company.
Yeah.
And he's
Like a manager of a store or something like that.
Yeah, and he's literally describing exactly what the CEO set in motion.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The CEO's like, oh boy. Well, let's just point out, first off, you need to learn more about your business because I'm the one in charge.
Yeah.
And that's basically what God's saying here. That's why I put it here. Look at me. I'm the captain now.
Mm-hmm.
Because they walk in here thinking, oh, yeah, we're going to destroy you. We're going to just totally lay you flat. And God's like, okay, if you think that your power is a testimony against my power, you're sorely mistaken because I think you received the wrong news.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm the one who gave you that power to begin with.
Right.
Did you miss that memo?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what I love here. Like, and this isn't the only time God does this.
Yeah.
The phrase "have you not heard" specifically, Yahweh is going to use that same phrase to mock Sennacherib. Or no, he used the phrase to mock Sennacherib as if he had somehow missed the groundbreaking news that Yahweh is the supreme one and throned over all things. But he will implement the same language in chapter 40, but he will be using it speaking to Israel, reminding them of his eternal dominion and power. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see the same phrase pop up again in chapter 40, which is an amazing chapter. It is the first chapter of the second half of the book of Isaiah, right? And when I say half, I'm not talking about like even number of chapters. I'm talking about second portion of Isaiah.
Right.
And God is going to look at them and be like, oh, do you not know? Have you not heard? I am the living God, the everlasting God, the one who created all things. Mm-hmm. And he's just reminding them who he is.
Right.
And so God really likes using this phrase because he's basically like, oh, did you not get that memo? Mm-hmm. Did I forget to tell you that?
My bad.
My bad. Yeah, it's really funny though. Did you not hear? Mm-hmm. Did you not hear the news? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, did you forget to turn on the channel and watch what happened? Like, I'm in charge. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm the big guy on campus. I am the one who's orchestrating all of this. Mm-hmm. This is where he just, I don't know, pulls off the mask, and it was him all along.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, you thought you were in charge. No. Sennacherib had boasted in his own power, yet God arrives on the scene and essentially says, oh, did you think you were the one defeating all those other nations of your own? How cute! You weren't conquering them on your own. I've been the one allowing you to cause all this destruction. I thought you knew. The mockery is meant to embarrass the Assyrian king. He had been nothing but a puppet accomplishing Yahweh's discipline. Which goes back to what you were talking about earlier, where we just have this supremely powerful God who is able to orchestrate all things for the good of his people, and who is literally able to set in motion the people he is going to use to punish his people. But then at the same time, if his people respond properly, and if they learn their lesson before they have to destroy them, then he can stop them too. Yeah. And so really, Assyria is totally just a puppet. Yeah. And that's kind of the imagery that Isaiah is going for here, right? They're just like marionettes dancing on strings, and it's really silly for a marionette to think that they have any sort of power,
yeah.
right? Because they would not be able to stand before Jerusalem if God had not allowed it.
Right.
And they're about to be sent away from Jerusalem because God is not allowing them any further. And so it really is just kind of like brutal irony that I absolutely love. What do you think about God's sense of humor here?
I think it's pretty funny. I also think it's funny, again, if you think about the last video, whenever the cupbearer came, he was saying that they had heard from God, and God told them, hey, go and destroy the people, like the land of Judah. And so, like, the fact that he recognized it, but then they come here and they were like mocking God before they recognized, hey, God sent us here. It's kind of funny. Like, it's like they like turned themselves completely around and God like flipped them upside down.
Yeah. And it made me think about this. I've been thinking about it over the course of the last week because I've actually re-listened to the whole book of Isaiah in between last week and this week.
Yeah.
I really wonder what Rob Shika meant when he said that. Like, I wonder if he was just making an empty claim.
Right.
Like,
that's what I was
wondering.
wondering.
I was wondering if maybe whenever he says, do you not know Yahweh sent us? Like, he was more just saying, like, oh, like, he was just, like, kind of blowing smoke.
Yeah.
Like, just trying to intimidate them. Because a lot of what he was doing was just trying to intimidate them.
Yeah.
And we really don't know, because it is possible that God did reveal to them, hey, I am raising you up to go against my people.
Right.
But
we just don't have that dialogue.
We don't know. But I was just wondering that. Like, I wonder if he was just being like, hey, God sent me against you. Oh, did he really? Because that would intimidate people. Like, if your own God sent them. I don't know.
And it would fit in the conversation, too. Because all the other stuff that he was saying wasn't, like, that was all fake stuff, too.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It would make sense.
God continues, I know you're sitting down and you're going out and coming in and you're raging against me. This is where God reveals that he is kind of Santa Claus, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. Because Yahweh's coming to town. Right? Sennacherib had defiantly mocked Yahweh and boasted in his own strength, but now Yahweh arrives on the scene and makes it abundantly clear that he has heard every last insult. Yahweh knew everything about his enemy, which seals their fate. So it's like, because you can imagine when the Assyrians hear this, which I don't know if the Assyrians ever actually heard this or not. It might have just been, this is what Isaiah is pronouncing to Hezekiah to encourage him. But if the Assyrians heard this and they believed it, this would be the part where they're already beginning to retreat. And they're like, ooh, I hope he didn't hear that one thing we said. And he's like, oh, I heard it. I heard every last bit.
Heard it.
I know when you sit down. I know when you leave a room. I know when you come into a room. And I know all the things you've been saying about me, and you're raging against me. Because you have raged against me, and your complacency has come to my ears, I'll put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I will turn you back on the way by which you came. Just as Assyria had enslaved the people they had conquered, so too Yahweh vows to conquer Assyria and give them a taste of their own medicine, and he will send them running back to their homeland. The imagery he uses is actually specifically how the Assyrians used to enslave people. They would put hooks in their noses and bits in their mouths. And we actually have like reliefs and like drawings of stuff where like that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
And so he's really using that imagery against them. He's like, just like you enslaved all those people along the way, I'm going to enslave you and I'm going to send you running back home with your tail between your legs. God, he's really just kind of flexing on them, right? He's saying, I'm the one in charge here.
I'm so powerful that I can use what you use for power to other people to overpower you.
Exactly. All right, we move on. And this shall be a sign for you. This year you shall eat what grows of itself, and in the second year what springs from that. Then in the third year sow and reap, and plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. And the surviving remnant of the house of Judah shall again take root downward, and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem shall go a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Therefore thus says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria. He shall not come into the city, or shoot an arrow there, or come before it with a shield, or cast up a siege mount against it. By the way that he came, by the same he shall return, and he shall not come into the city, declares the Lord. For I will defend this city and to save it, for my own sake, and for the sake of my servant David. Okay. So we turn away from Assyria now, right? The whole poetry thing, that was a poem against Assyria,
right?
Which you can imagine that being sung to a song, it's like a battle hymn, it's a war cry, just singing all the stuff against Assyria. And then now Isaiah turns his attention back to Hezekiah, and he says the same words that he said to Ahaz in Isaiah chapter 7, right? This shall be a sign to you. But the sign back then was the young woman shall give birth to a son, and you shall call him Immanuel, right? Or specifically, it could be translated as virgin, right? And we've talked about that back in Isaiah 7. If you want to know more, go look at it. But the sign that Isaiah promised Ahaz was meant to demonstrate that God was still with his people. Right. And so whenever that young woman gave birth to a child, it would let Ahaz know that God was with them. Right. And then that was the same thing for the people of Israel when it came to the Messiah being born. A literal virgin gave birth to a child who was literally God with them. Right. Same thing's happening here. About 30 years later, Isaiah is no longer talking to Ahaz, but he's talking to Ahaz's son. And just as God gave Ahaz a sign to demonstrate that he was still with them, so he's also giving Hezekiah a sign as well. And the sign is this. This year you shall eat what grows of itself, and in the second year what springs from that. Then in the third year sow and reap, and plant vineyards, and eat their fruit, and the surviving remnant of the house of Judah shall again take root downward and bear fruit upward. Right? So first off, he starts talking about just the food that they eat. And I'll summarize this again in a second. But he's talking about the fruit that they eat, but then he uses the same imagery to describe the people, right? So he's talking about just as you are going to be able to consume food and I'm going to abundantly provide for you in your fields, in the same way, I'm going to plant the people of Judah in the ground and their roots are going to go downward so that they bear fruit upward, as in they're going to still dwell in the land, their roots are going down, and as a result, they're going to have plenty and they're going to abound and things are going to go well because he is being gracious to them. For out of Jerusalem shall go a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Right? And so he says there will be a remnant that exists and they will survive and everything will be fine. Because at this point, like I said, Judah has been primarily destroyed. But there's always a remnant, and that's something that you need to remember just going forward throughout all the books of the prophets. There's always going to be a remnant that remains, because God does have promises, and that's what he's going to talk about in a second when we get down to verse 35. He has a promise that he made. He's not going to abandon that. So there's always going to be a remnant left, and thanks to Hezekiah, the remnant is a little bit bigger than it would have been had Hezekiah not prayed that prayer. So, to just summarize that, just as Isaiah had given Ahaz a sign showing that God was with his people, so too Hezekiah is promised a sign. Through the Assyrian invasion, sorry, that's a typo. Through the Assyrian invasion, oh no, just kidding, it was not a typo, I was just wrong. Though the Assyrian invasion had prevented proper agricultural practice, God promises that the people will have more than enough in the coming years, demonstrating that it is he who saved his remnant. Right, so because of Assyria, they'd kind of been holed up in their cities. They hadn't been able to go out and plant because they never knew when Assyria was going to come. But he says, this year, you'll eat what grows of itself. It's just going to grow, and you're going to be able to eat it. The second year, what springs from that? So more will come forth after that. Then in the third year, sow and reap, and plant vineyards and eat their fruit. So in the third year, go out there, do what you normally do, and things are going to go back to normal after that. Right? And that's going to demonstrate that God is with his people, right? It's Immanuel, God with us, right? Whenever you eat this fruit that you did not plant and that you did not sow and that you did not reap, you'll know that God is with you, because that is kind of a supernatural thing. You should not expect that. When Isaiah had first confronted Ahaz, he had brought his son Shear-Jashub with him, and the name of that son meant a remnant shall return. But it also could mean a remnant shall turn. The specific verb there, I think it's the word shub, right? Shear-Jashub. Shub right there, I believe, is the verb that means either turn or return. It can mean either one. And so it could mean a remnant shall return, in which case you could interpret this as even further in the future, they'll return from exile. But it could also be interpreted in regards to this as a remnant shall turn to God. Right? A remnant turned, and that's why they're being preserved, right? The faithful remnant is going to be preserved in Judah as a result of Hezekiah's salvation, right? And so, once again, I'm just trying to draw the parallels between this section and what we saw in Isaiah chapter 7, because we see that this is reaching a climactic moment in the book. Right? And so, really, it seems like Isaiah is setting the book up for a conclusion. But what we're going to see in next week's lesson is that there's going to be a big plot twist that's going to set in motion the back half of the book. And so a lot of people, they'll look at Isaiah chapters 1 through 39 and 40 through 66, and they'll say, oh, they're obviously two different books. But I think if you're following with it from a literary perspective, you're going to see that that is very intentional, because there's a big plot twist in chapters 38 and 39, to where Assyria has been the looming threat for this whole time, and they're finally delivered. And then in chapters 38 and 39, Babylon's going to enter the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And how Hezekiah responds to Babylon is not going to be nearly as good as he responded to Assyria here, and therefore God's going to tell him, you're going to go into captivity in Babylon. And so chapters 40 through 66 is to comfort the people whenever they go off into exile. And so I kind of just gave a spoiler to what we're going to talk about next week.
Spoiler alert.
But the reason I said that is because it all ties back to Isaiah 7, right? Isaiah 7 is really where the main thrust of the book of Isaiah sets in motion, and we're seeing all those plot threads seemingly being resolved, and so it feels like the book is coming to a natural conclusion.
Right.
And that's why I love the plot twist. And you're like, ooh,
actually not.
Nice. Exactly. And so then we go down. Therefore, thus says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into the city, or shoot an arrow there, or come before it with a shield, or cast up a siege mount against it. By the way that he came, by the same he shall return. And he shall not come into the city, declares the Lord. For I will defend the city to save it for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David. What do you think about just God's response throughout all of this here?
Again, it definitely shows his faithfulness to his people, despite if the people are faithful to him. So it shows the importance of this covenant that he set in place. That was like a one-way covenant. It was something that God will always uphold, but he knew that the people wouldn't uphold. And that's just also, even if you go back to the very beginning, the fact that he made that covenant knowing that people wouldn't stay faithful, that's just really cool too. And I would imagine whenever they heard these words that they were probably very relieved. They're like, oh, okay, God is on our side. He is here with us to support us and to protect us in Assyria.
Is on your side.
There you go.
Sorry. You said that, and my mind's in a weird place today. So yes, no, I think that these are probably very relieving words to the people of Judah. So Assyria will prove powerless against Judah for the sake of his own glory and for the sake of his promise to David. God would turn Assyria away and would defend his people. Notice that he does not do this for the people's sake, for they are deserving of judgment. That's really the one thing that sticks out to me in verse 35. So right in verse 34, he says, this is what he says concerning Assyria. He will not come into the city or shoot an arrow there or come with a shield or cast a siege mount against it. He says he's not going to be able to do anything. He is all talk, no action. He came up here and he was planning on attacking you. I'm not going to let it happen. And now you're wondering, how are you going to stop that? I mean, they're literally right outside. And we're going to see how it happens. By the way he came, by the same shall he return, and he shall not come into the city. So he came willingly to Judah. So he's going to leave willingly back home. How's that going to happen? We'll have to see. For I will defend the city to save it. Right? And so we have Yahweh here saying, I don't care what Egypt has to offer you. I don't care what your own army has to offer you. I'm going to be the one to defend the city.
Yeah.
And we're going to see God's literally going to do this. Literally in the next slide. It's going to be really cool. I will defend the city to save it for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David. Right? So for his own glory. And then he brings up David. And specifically what he means here is the covenant that he made to David, right? He made a promise in 2 Samuel chapter 7, which, if you stay with us long enough and the other series that we're going through, I've been uploading our Bible study videos going through the book of Samuel.
Yeah.
We'll eventually get to 2 Samuel 7, and we'll talk about this. So watch those videos too. But he's going to make a promise to David, and he's going to say that there's always going to be a king sitting on David's throne. And that is another covenant that is a one-way thing. And it's not like a reciprocal, like he says, just like he made a promise to Abraham, he says, I'm going to bless the world through your seed, right? And I'm going to give you land. I'm going to give you a family. I'm going to give you a blessing, right? That was a one-way thing. Same thing to David. He's going to say, because of who you are and how faithful you've been to me, there's always going to be a king on the throne.
Yeah.
And so right here, he turns to Hezekiah and he says, hey, I'm going to save the city and I'll defend it myself for my own glory and for the sake of David. But he doesn't say for the sake of Judah.
Yeah.
And that says something, right? Because he's like, y'all don't deserve it. But your prayer tells me that your heart's in the right place. Yeah. Hezekiah did not appeal to God on behalf of the people. He did not appeal to God, even on behalf of David necessarily, I don't believe.
I don't think so.
Because I don't think I remember that there. He specifically appealed on behalf of God's glory.
Right.
And God adds the David thing because he's revealing, well, yeah, I wasn't going to let y'all get destroyed anyways because I made a promise.
Yeah.
But Hezekiah's prayer was specifically focused on the glory of God. And whenever you tell God, hey, your glory's at stake here, that's probably the number one way to get him to move. Okay, and then we get to the last slide that we're covering today. And the angel of Yahweh went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when people arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies. Then Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and returned home and lived at Nineveh. And as he was worshipping in the house of Nisroch, his god, Adramelech and Sharezer, his sons, struck him down with the sword. And after they escaped into the land of Ararat, I have a tough time with all these names.
They're hard.
Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place. Okay. So all of a sudden the resolution happens.
Yeah.
And notice we have 3 verses here.
Yeah.
3 verses.
Yeah.
We've had 37 chapters of build up to this
Right.
moment. And because Hezekiah muttered a single prayer, the whole thing is resolved in 3 verses.
Yeah. Quick deliverance. Very quick deliverance.
3 verses. And really, the deliverance happens in 1 verse. It's in verse 36.
Right. Yeah. You know what's happening by end of 36.
Yeah, verses 37 and 38 are just the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 1 verse for God to literally change everything.
Yeah.
And we have spent 37 chapters with Isaiah trying to convince the people to just trust in God.
Yeah.
If that isn't a summary of the Christian life, I don't know what is. Like, God's like, trust in me, trust in me, trust in me, trust in me, trust in me. And we're like, no, no, no. And then finally he's like, trust in me. And we're like, okay. And then everything works out. You're like, oh.
Why haven't I been doing that the whole time?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, it's ridiculous.
Silly old me.
Yeah. And so we do have this very interesting thing right here, right? And the angel of the Lord, which anytime the angel of the Lord shows up, you always have to wonder who that is. Is it just an angel, or is it specifically Jesus, basically, like a pre-incarnate Christ?
Right.
Which is really interesting there. So the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians, and when the people arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies. So God supernaturally intervenes and wipes out the Assyrians overnight. And this is such a significant story that it's repeated 3 different times in the Old Testament. It shows up here, it shows up in 2 Kings, and it shows up in 2 Chronicles. The 2 Kings account is almost word for word. But 3 times in the Old Testament, that tells you this is really this whole section of stuff shows up in all those.
Yeah.
But this is a big moment. God literally takes out 185,000 people overnight, and you just got to wonder what happened there. And to me, one thing that I wonder is like, do we have any records of this? And you wouldn't really expect to have records of this, primarily because usually history is told from the perspective of those who win.
Right.
And the Assyrians are not very likely to mention something like this. Especially, like, that's one thing about, like, the Egyptians. People always talk about, like, oh, yeah, the Egyptians never mentioned the Exodus.
It's like, I doubt they wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever read Egyptian history? They only mention the times they succeed, and even in battles we know they lost, they try to paint it like it was a draw.
Yeah.
And so typically that's how things worked, right? And so I wouldn't expect to hear anything from the Assyrian perspective about this event. But are there anything else that talks about this? But interestingly, there actually is something from the Assyrian records that seems to allude to this and doesn't really explain it very well, right? So it says, so in Sennacherib's Annals, right? This is called the Sennacherib prison. I think this one's actually called the Taylor Prism. There are a bunch of different prisms, which this whole thing right here is only like 18 inches tall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really small, but it's inscribed, and it tells like just the annals of, about like what Sennacherib did during his reign. Yeah. And in the Annals, they record his campaign against and deportation of Israel, right? So that was in 722 BC, right? Where he came in and like just took out the northern kingdom. And it even mentions his conquering 46 cities in Judah, including smaller towns in addition to that, which is what we've read about in the Old Testament and what we read about here, right? He was in Lachish earlier, and he was going to different cities trying to conquer them. Right. And so it records that he did conquer 46 cities and smaller towns. It states that he laid siege to Jerusalem, but that he left after Hezekiah paid him off.
Oh, change that up a little bit.
Which to me, that is interesting, right? I'm not going to say that I just totally doubt it. I mean, personally, I place the validity of Scripture far over anything else, right? And so if Scripture says that 185,000 people died, I believe 185,000 people died. But when it comes to this, I'm like, that seems like a convenient story. Right? You're going through here, conquering everything, and you've been conquering all these other cities nonstop. And then for some reason, all because this guy pays you money, you just like give up and leave and go home? Yeah. That's kind of weird. Yeah. It seems awfully convenient there. And also, the whole reason, like he says that the reason he was going against Hezekiah and marching against Judah is because they had turned against him and had stopped paying money. And typically, if we're just talking about how kingdoms work and empires work, all because the person's like, oh, sorry, here's the money I owe you, usually that's not enough to pay you off, right? Usually you're going to destroy them anyways. And so the fact that he says, oh yeah, he paid us off and we left, that makes me skeptical. Interestingly, the 5th century historian Herodotus records that while Assyria attacked Egypt, during the night a horde of field mice gnawed quivers and their bows and the handles of shields, with the result that many were killed fleeing unarmed the next day. Herodotus is not talking about them in Judah, he's talking about them in Egypt, but some people say, I mean, this is in the 5th century, so this is quite a bit later. I think it's 5th century BC. I forget when Herodotus lived. I think it was 5th century BC. But it could be AD, but I'm pretty sure it's BC. This is a little bit later, and so it's possible that he's getting his stories mixed up. But we do have evidence here of the Assyrians getting, like, a big number of them being killed and fleeing. And what I want us to point out here is that verse 36 does not necessarily say that the Assyrians were at Judah whenever they left. Right? It just says that 185,000 were killed overnight, leading them to flee. It doesn't necessarily say that that happened in Judah. It just says that it happened there, and we know that the Egyptians were rising up to go against them and stuff at this time because it talked about that in the previous chapter, in previous verses. And so, to me, I don't necessarily see those as conflicting. I think that what Herodotus is talking about here could very possibly be the same event. And some people might suggest that God using, or they might suggest that saying that Herodotus' account is correct is to take away from the sovereignty of God because it says that mice are the one who killed them. I don't think so.
I mean, if God sent the plagues in Egypt, it's the same type of stuff.
Yeah, God uses natural means to perform supernatural. Like, it's just because God's the one in charge of stuff.
Yeah,
like we don't know. Like, God could have just struck them dead by his own power,
right?
Or he could have used his power to cause mice to do it. That doesn't really affect me at all, but I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Because we do have an Assyrian record which does admit, yeah, we just left. And then you have this account from Herodotus who says, there was this one time where they were going against the Egyptians, and then a bunch of them just mysteriously died, and they just fled.
Yeah.
And so to me, it does kind of line up. I just thought that was interesting.
It is, yeah.
And so then we read, then Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and returned home and lived at Nineveh. Right? Nineveh is a famous city that we're going to have to remember for other books of the prophets, but it was like the capital at this time. And as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch his god, Adramelech and Sharezer, his son, struck him down with a sword, and after they escaped into the land of Ararat, Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place. This is mainly, really this whole slide I'm dealing with just more historical facts here. Because theologically, we've already seen the setup for this, right? This is just God fulfilling his promises. And I mainly want to quote historical stuff just so you know that the Bible's not making it up. This actually happened. So just as God promised, Sennacherib left and went back home. 20 years later, on October 20th, 681 BC, two of his sons, Arda Mulisu, who's called Adramelech in the biblical account, and Nabushad-Usur, or Shaduzer, they killed Sennacherib in a Ninevite temple in an attempt to seize the throne. What's interesting about this is that it doesn't happen immediately, right? So whenever you read verses 37 and 38, there's a 20-year time gap in between the two, which is interesting because Sennacherib probably went back and thought that he had escaped God's judgment, but he hadn't. And so 20 years later, it actually is fulfilled. However, given the negative press that came from murdering the leader of the world's strongest, one of the world's strongest empires, his two sons that murdered him didn't actually receive the throne, and Esarhaddon, another of his sons, actually reigned in his place from 681 to 669 BC. And so, what the biblical account is recording here is historically accurate, which we shouldn't be surprised by because the Bible is the inerrant word of God. Right? And so, there's the little conclusion to that. And just as a final thought, to just wrap this up, and then I want to hear your thoughts and stuff just on this whole section a little bit. I put here at the bottom, because of Hezekiah's faithfulness, Judah is spared the same fate as Israel. God indeed is with them. Right? And so really, chapter 37 seems to bring the whole story of Isaiah to a conclusion.
It does.
Right? The whole thing, right? We've been saying, okay, trust in God, trust in God, trust in God. Hezekiah trusted in God, and the Assyrians fled. And in a single verse, God, he swoops in, he destroys them, they flee, and they're delivered. And it's like, great. Let's move on to Jeremiah. But then we're going to get to chapter 38 and 39. And it's going to be like, oh.
Actually.
Yeah. And so there's going to be a big plot twist that eventually motivates the rest of the book. But what do you think about this section? And what do you think about just this whole story here?
Yeah, I think it comes to a cool close. I mean, the book isn't over, but the story itself, the way it closes, is satisfying. I think it's good. And then just overall, I think it's really cool just to see how, just the power of just one prayer, seeing how Hezekiah completely changed like the history for the people and for Judah just because of his one prayer of stepping out in faith. And that's really cool. And that God listens to it too, right? So it's like it's like a two-sided thing. The fact that Hezekiah was able to act upon his faith, and then the fact that God chose to respond. And if you follow us in our Hesed series, I mean, you already mentioned it earlier, but we talk about how Hesed is just a general character of God. So it is, the word itself is mentioned many times, and that's what the series is about. But we also talk about how it's just interwoven throughout scripture itself. And I think that this story really does show that, because the people of Judah were not deserving at all, but yet God rescued them anyways. And so you see how Hesed is a key characteristic of God. Like that is the core of who he is. And we see how that's interwoven in this story without it actually literally being there in the text. And that's just really cool. So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So let's wrap this bad boy up. For the last 2 weeks, we have talked about Hezekiah's faith. But next week, we're going to talk about Hezekiah's folly.
Look at that. Alliteration.
Yeah, alliteration. It's great. And
love it.
Yep. And so the first chapter is going to be relatively positive for Hezekiah. But then in chapter 39, we're going to have 8 verses that are going to literally, that's where the plot twist is. At the very end, final 8 verses, there's going to be something that happens. Hezekiah is not going to respond properly, and it's going to lay the groundwork for chapters 40 through 66. And so, if you want to see that happen, come back next week.
Next time.
Until then, my name's David.
And my name's Brian.
And this has been Now Let's Be Honest. Be sure to download these things, these slides at nowletsbehonest.com/resources. And if you would like to support us on Patreon, do that at patreon.com/David Tate. Other than that, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, comment below. Those things are actually really, really helpful. And so the more you comment and the more you like and the more you share it with people, it really helps us get these teachings out there. And so even if that's not what you normally do, please just do that, because I want more people talking about the prophets.
Yes, absolutely.
I want more people talking about the Old Testament. I also just want more people talking about the Bible.
Absolutely.
And so please be doing that for us. I'd really appreciate that. Look forward to interacting with y'all in the comments. We will see y'all next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be sure to keep a smile on your face. Don't let anybody steal your joy. Bye.
Bye.
You read a verse, you sing a hymn, the money's in the plate. Sundays you mark out for him, but even then you show up late. You bought the shirt, you wear the cross, but sin throughout the week. For 30 shekels and a noose, you kiss him on the cheek.